Hi, welcome to today's Voice of Greatness broadcast. My name is Joel Bryant and I'm your host. And on today's broadcast, I want to take a few moments and speak with you about something that I call the frustration of greatness. Now, you and I both know that we don't have to be pursuing greatness to encounter frustration. Sometimes we just need to wake up in the morning and don't even need to step outside of our door. Just simply open our eyes and open our minds to realize the conflicting tendencies and expectations and hopes that seem to be thwarted and denied and balked at. And so at that point, we make a judgment about our consequences or about our capacity to affect the ends that we desire. And depending upon that judgment or that evaluation or that conclusion, then frustration results as a consequence. And a lot of times we make these judgments prematurely because we're forecasting and foreseeing, and we're really foreboding. And we forebode, we can't help but become forlorn. And from there, we begin to descend into a series of emotions that allow us and cause us to experience a loss of power, a loss of perspective, a loss of influence, and a loss of optimism in our circumstances. But I'm not a psychologist, so I don't want to get too far into those kinds of categorical distinctions that you and I are both familiar with. But there's a frustration that is unique to pursuing greatness. Now, we live in an age of great turmoil and great tumult where people are losing their jobs, they're losing their spouses, they're losing their homes, they're losing their social status and their self-esteem at increasing rates. And as a result of that, there's been a significant increase in the last 10 years of suicide. I just read a study the other day that said nationally the suicide rate increased 28%. And overall, it increased 40% among middle-aged men and women. And I believe it said particularly white men and women who tend to be the most affluent. And so I guess they have more to live for. And on the backside, they also have more to die for in terms of suicide. And of course, it's not that simplistic. That's not a diatribe or a dig at any group of people. It's just recognizing that you and I live in an age of great change, great chastening, and people are chafing and they're chomping at the bit because they don't know how to handle these circumstances. But there is a unique frustration that we experience when we pursue greatness. And that frustration is more intense, it's more intensive and more extensive, it is more pervasive and pronounced. I mean, think about this. Have you ever been tormented and teased by your vision? Have you ever felt vexed and violated by your vision, by your pursuit of greatness, by your desire for greatness? Now, imagine that pursuit and the emotions that come with that pursuit, and put that on top of the normal pursuits that everybody is pursuing in terms of taking care of their life and their lifestyle. So not only do people who pursue greatness have the emotional configuration of those challenges, but also just keeping a job, taking care of an aging spouse, taking care of a broken relationship, a child who may be wayward, a diagnosis that leaves their lives in limbo. Believe me, I understand that. I spent probably from age 20 to 30, thinking almost every other day about suicide. Frustration was so intense that I thought, you know what, this is not even worth it. And I'm glad that I never did it. But I understand to the nth degree the frustration just of life, number one, and then that comes with greatness, number two. So what we've got to do, though, we've got to really find ways to manage our frustration. Because we may not commit suicide in terms of take our own lives, but we'll certainly kill our dreams. We'll certainly bury them. We'll begin to apologize and make excuses for even daring to believe that we were legitimate candidates for greatness. So I want to encourage you today. I understand powerfully and painfully the frustration of greatness. When you work and you toil and you toil, but you have yet to triumph. You can't seem to get the break you need. You can't seem to get the opportunity that you need. And so what happens in that space, you begin to conclude that, you know what, it's never going to change. I say it this way. People who commit suicide and people who quit, they are suggesting that they have a degree of omniscience. That means they're using today's circumstances. They're using the accumulation of 5 years of circumstances to say, you know what, it is never going to change for me. And so because I have all knowledge, which is what omniscience means, I'm going to take my life. I'm going to bury my dream and sell my vision and just return to a life of quiet desperation. I understand that, but what you've got to do is stop and recognize that just because you've had a season and a series of setbacks, your life is not over. You don't have to close the business. And if you do close the business, don't close your mind. Maybe you're in the wrong business. Have you ever considered that? You say, well, Joel, I've been doing this for 20 years, and you enumerate your expertise and your excellence, and it's for you to decide, but maybe you need to reinvent your business. And you can't reinvent your business unless you reinvent yourself. And you can't reinvent yourself as long as you're confusing yourself with your circumstances. You are not your circumstances. That's part of the problem in our culture. We have a one-dimensional society where we are what we do. You know, I'm a professor. I'm a teacher. No, I'm a man who teaches. I'm not a writer. I'm a man who writes. If I identify with my profession and the lack of professional success, I promise you, I would have took my life years ago. I would have given up on my dream years ago. But I learned years ago that I am not what I do. Although that's how people know us, that's how we get our social status and our self-esteem. But we have to be very careful about co-opting identities that ultimately are influenced by forces that's beyond our control, called the market. Our reputation is what other people say. Our character is who we are. So one way to manage the frustration of greatness is to focus on your character, not just your reputation. Not just that social image that you desire to present and to project by your ability to have a successful business or to be a successful person. If you just stay around and stay at it and make adjustments, that will come in time and through effort. But it won't come if you allow frustration to overshadow till you're no longer present and prescient. Presciencent. That literally means pre-knowledge. How can we take advantage of opportunities that will come to us if we stop now and make a permanent decision about a circumstance that is passing through our lives? So I want to encourage you today. This is an age of great emotional upheaval. And it takes tremendous emotional intelligence. And I don't mean just in dealing with other people like Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book on that years ago and is really one of the big proponents of emotional intelligence. I mean being intelligent in the way you handle yourself, your frustration, how you talk to yourself during this time of great tumult, how you behave with yourself in this time of great uncertainty. Are you being your own best friend? You say, well, Joel, what does that have to do with greatness? Well, first of all, if you're not emotionally healthy, what good is greatness? If you're not able to handle and to negotiate those dynamics, the anxieties, the frustration, the exasperation, the despondency, all those emotions that our culture really doesn't like to talk about when they talk about pursuing greatness. We like to talk about the wow, but we don't like to talk about the woes. Those emotional pits that entrepreneurs, success-minded people endure. And oftentimes they dig those pits for themselves because they are willing to believe in their dreams. So be encouraged. Focus on your character. Focus on what you can control. Sometimes you don't even know what that is. Well, then if you don't know what that is, focus again on self-control. Not social control, not controlling the environment, not controlling the market and its response. Sure, be diligent, have a good product, have a good reputation, have good customer service, have all those mechanics and those mechanisms that mediate and moderate our image to the marketplace. But no, as you do that, you're going to encounter frustration. And you can't allow frustration, don't allow frustration to make you commit the ultimate act of treason, which is not suicide, but giving up on your dreams. Close the business, but don't close your mind. You may have to file bankruptcy financially, but don't file emotional bankruptcy. And if you do, make sure you file reorganization, not liquidation. See, suicide is simply liquidation. You're saying, I'm going to sell all my assets, which you no longer see as assets. You only see liabilities. I'm going to sell them and ditch it all. That's what suicide is. Believe me, I understand. As a philosopher, as an existentialist, as a person who's keenly and acutely acquainted with all the vicissitudes of life, I understand the frustration of life and, more importantly, the frustration of greatness. And I understand the importance of emotional intelligence and how I assess, how I sort, and how I assign values to my circumstances and to myself. And I say, you know what? I've got to be patient, prudent, and maintain my integrity, my interpersonal wholeness, intrapersonal wholeness, and how I treat myself. Because if I don't treat myself, you know what happened? If you don't treat yourself, you know what you're going to do? You're going to betray yourself. See, sometimes in this pursuit of greatness, in this, 60-hour work week that most entrepreneurs do, about 80 hours on average, they work about 80 hours on average. Sometimes you just need to stop working. Cut off the success tape. Cut off the CD player. I know you've turned your car into a college, but for the moment, cut off the CD player, cut off the iPod, get off the Ustream, and just get some time away. See, it's so important. See, if we don't renew ourselves, if we're not renewed, we will ultimately renege on our commitments. And sometimes vacations don't do their job because we don't let them. We don't truly vacate because we think that business, that opportunity, that impending circumstance cannot survive without our conscious and almost obsessive emotional attention to it. And I'm not talking about negligence. I am speaking about being renewed so that you and I don't renege on our commitments. Otherwise, we're going to be tormented and teased, violated and vexed by our visions of greatness. And that means the journey has become something that is less than enjoyable. I want to encourage you today. I know times are tough. Robert Schuller, the great preacher out in California, motivational speaker, wrote a book in the 80s or 90s, and it was called Tough Times Don't Last, but Tough People Do. I know you're tough. I'm tough. Times are tough. But what we've got to do in order to manage the frustration of greatness and all the things that frustration makes us do is we've got to stop, focus on our characters, get some time away, be renewed so that we don't renege. See, it is so easy in adversity to damn your destiny. Do you realize in adversity you will damn your destiny? And see, destiny is the designer of greatness. I remember, I love Shakespeare. And if you ever read not just his plays, but read his sonnets. In Sonnet 29, if I can recall some of the lines, it says, when in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing to be like one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, design this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy, contented least. In these thoughts of myself almost despising, happily I think of thee. Then like the lark to the break of day arising from sullen earth sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered, such wealth brings, that then I shun to change my state with kings. What Shakespeare is saying is this: when I look around at other people's circumstances and lifestyles, they seem to be more favored, they are more flourishing, they're more prosperous, and they're more privileged. And when I look at them, I look at myself and I begin to curse my fate. And then I call to a deaf heaven, and it's unresponsive. And my cries and my prayers and my pleas produce no result. And so then he engages in the dangerous art of comparison, wishing to be like one more rich in hope. And you've got to be careful. Yes, there are people who have everything. They have more than you and I have. But that should not intensify and magnify our frustration. Now, does it? Of course. So what you've got to do is get your eyes off that person. Imagine driving your car trying to look at the person in the other lane the whole time you're driving. It's only a matter of time before you wreck and reap the consequences of negligence. See, part of our frustration is reading too much and hearing too much about other people, their successes, their triumphs, all the accolades and laurels that seem to be thrown at their feet. And so what happens is you and I begin to despise and to begin to be disgusted. And what we would do is we would damn our destiny because of adversity. There's a saying that says, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. Now, I don't say that to indict or disparage anyone, because believe me, as I said before, I know what it is to be frustrated beyond measure. But I also understand and begin to look at what was causing my frustration to be more intense and more entangled than it should have been. And it came because I was not focusing on my character, my own personal development, not my professional aspirations, but my personal development. I began to compare myself too much with other people, and I was not getting renewed. And so I began to renege on my commitments. And that's when people walk away. They sell their business just when they were about to win. They give up on their dream just when something was about to change. They drop out of school because they failed one course. I remember the professor in Alabama a few years ago. She didn't get tenure and she walked into the committee and shot 4 or 5 people. Many of you are academics, intellectuals. Let me tell you something. Do you know the suicide rate is highest between people who are in their 50s, 35 to 64, particularly 50s. Men and women in their 50s, because they're at mid-career and they didn't get the promotion. Or they got the promotion but the wife left. They got the job but they got laid off. And so in that moment, they made a decision that was detrimental to them and those in their social circle. I want to encourage you today. You're going to experience the frustration of greatness. Do you know what the word frustration means? It does not mean to be thwarted and rebuffed and refused and denied. Look it up. The word frustration literally means to be deceived. Think about that. The reason we have these negative emotions because we're allowing that circumstance to deceive us to say, I am permanent, I am pervasive, and I am irremediable. I cannot be changed. So therefore, you need to make a decision that is detrimental to yourself. And we don't realize that when we're frustrated, we're not being thwarted and balked and rebuffed and refused and denied. We are actually being deceived in the moment by a circumstance. I love the way Emerson says it. He says we must be very wary of the delusions of time. He said today we don't know whether we are busy or we are idle, but we look back and we realize that much was accomplished. So let me ask you to do this as I close. Let me encourage you to do this. Whenever you find yourself about to walk away and give up on the thing that you really believed in, including yourself, I'm going to ask you to suspend your judgment. Can you do that? Are you willing to hit the pause button on your life? Not to make a judgment, not to issue a verdict or an edict, but simply say, you know what? I'm going to the store and get some ice cream. You know, there's a story that said that Nero fiddled while Rome burned. So we're not talking about being negligent. We're talking about being renewed so that we don't renege. We're not fiddling, we're figuring, we're giving our subconscious, we're giving the metaphysical forces that really influence our destinies a chance to make conditions more conducive for our advancement. Now that's not highly empirical and it can't be controlled because it doesn't come from logic, but what are the consequences? What are the alternatives? What are the options? Do we give up? Do we give out? Do we walk away? Do we take our lives? Do we close the business? Do we close our minds? Do we file bankruptcy in terms of liquidation because of a few liabilities? Or do we say, you know what? I'm going to take today's defeat and I'm going to come back stronger. I'm going to come back wiser, more intelligent and more intelligible. And if you do that, guess what? You can win. See, we can't win if we quit. So don't be deceived. Another definition of the word frustration means to be in error. See, whenever I'm frustrated, there's something faulty in my thinking or my acting or my concluding. So go back and reevaluate Revise your thinking, your acting, and your concluding. It also means to be in vain. And that means when we are frustrated, we think that nothing we do is going to have an effect in the material world or in the emotional world of our own psyche. And so our psychic forces begin to be defeated and they turn against us. And what was once an asset becomes a liability. It puts us in limbo and we stop our lives. I want to encourage you today. You will be in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes. Sometimes the very people that you thought were going to help you will not render the aid that you were banking on. You're going to find yourself out of sorts and out of sync. That's part of life. Those times are meant for our character development, not our professional prominence and our aspirations, but our emotional person. I'll talk more about it in another broadcast, but really, you know what frustration does? It creates an atmosphere for positive disintegration. And I'll talk more about that on a future broadcast, but for now, I want to encourage you today. Times are tough. They're tough. Great turmoil, great tumult. But if you can stay focused and become flexible, reassess your conclusions. Stop comparing yourself with other people. Don't even compare yourself with yourself. You say, well, Joel, I'm 50. I should have been, and you name the place that you should have been, but you're not there. Or you say, well, Joel, 10 years ago, I had it all, and the market changed and things changed, and now, well, that's okay. That's a lot of people's stories. It's only going to make your rise even more regal. And if you don't rise, guess what? You can become wise for other people. You can give them the benefit of where you've been. And if you do that, you will increase your capacity to achieve greatness in a dimension, because your demeanor is not that of an individual who feels like he's been victimized and violated by life. And that's a tough perspective to assume, but it's either that or we die defeated. And that's not what life has for you. You were born to win. You were born to win. And if you believe that, it's only a matter of time and circumstance before you get the opportunity that will allow you to experience and to express your native genius and your latent greatness. This has been the Voice of Greatness broadcast. My name is Joel Bryant. Until next time, I want you to have a greatness week, because you can.